Did you know that the 2023-24 financial year marked one of the worst economic periods in modern Australian history? Wages stagnated, productivity plummeted, and housing costs skyrocketed, leaving average Australians struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Today, more than 30% of household income is spent just on rent. And for renters in cities like Sydney and Melbourne, the situation is even worse, with rental prices soaring by as much as 20% year on year. Imagine lining up with dozens of others for a single property, only to pay hundreds more than you budgeted, just to avoid homelessness. Sydney isn't just expensive, it's now the second most unaffordable city in the entire world. This isn't just a housing problem, it's a crisis that's reshaping our economy, our communities, and the way we live. So how did we get here? Why does owning a home or even renting one feel impossible for so many Australians? And most importantly, what can we do to fix this? Join us as we uncover the dark side of Australia's crisis, exploring its causes, its impact, and what the future holds for us all. Australia, a land where endless beaches meet vast deserts and vibrant cities pulse with life under sun-soaked skies. It's a place where nature's beauty takes your breath away, and the lifestyle seems like a dream come true. Who wouldn't want to wake up to golden beaches or explore lush rainforests just a stone's throw away from world-class cities? But here's the thing. What if that dream wasn't quite as simple as it seems? Sure, the sun and surf are great, but have you seen the price of rent in Sydney lately? Or tried to navigate the housing market in Melbourne, where owning a home feels more like winning the lottery than a realistic goal? For many Australians, the dream of living here is turning into sleepless nights, wondering how to make ends meet. For many Australians, more than 30% to 40% of their income is going straight to housing costs. That's well beyond the recommended threshold for financial stability. And it's not just numbers on a page, it's real lives. Families are being forced out of neighborhoods they've lived in for decades. Young people are delaying milestones like marriage or starting families because they simply can't afford their own space. Retirees who hoped for peaceful golden years are finding their fixed incomes stretched to the breaking point. The dream of living in Australia has always been about balance, work, leisure, community. But for many, that balance feels unattainable now. But the housing crisis doesn't exist in a vacuum. One of the key forces driving this pressure is Australia's rapidly growing population, fueled by immigration. New arrivals bring incredible diversity and skills to the country, but they also need homes. And right now, there simply aren't enough to go around. So how does immigration tie into Australia's housing challenges? Let's take a closer look. Australia is a dream destination for people from all over the world, and who can blame them? But with every person who packs up their life to move here, the housing crisis takes another hit. In the past couple of years, immigration numbers have soared. For example, in 2023-2024, Australia welcomed 667,000 new migrants. That's almost like adding the entire population of Tasmania in a single year. Here's where it gets tricky. Many of these new arrivals head straight to the big cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, where jobs and opportunities are concentrated. But these cities already have a massive housing shortage. Now imagine hundreds of thousands of people competing for the same limited homes and rentals. What happens next? Prices shoot up, and the competition becomes cutthroat. It's not just homeowners and renters who feel the squeeze. It's also local families who've lived in these areas for generations. Rising demand pushes them out of neighborhoods they've called home for years. And while immigration adds incredible diversity and strength to Australia's cultural fabric, it also highlights a major gap. We simply aren't building enough homes to keep up. This imbalance is what makes the housing crisis so urgent. Without better planning, the influx of people will continue to strain resources, making it even harder for everyone, locals and newcomers alike, to find a place to call home. This surge in population brings us to the heart of the problem: supply. How can a growing nation house everyone when we're not building enough homes to match the demand? Let's dive into why construction just isn't keeping up and how that's fueling the housing crisis. Here's the crux of the issue. Australia's housing supply simply can't keep up with its booming population. The demand for homes is skyrocketing, but the actual number of new homes being built? It's falling woefully short. To put it into perspective, while the population grew by over 500,000 people in the last year alone, housing construction has been crawling at a pace far below what's needed to meet even half of that demand. Why is this happening? One big factor is the rising cost of building materials and labor. Over the past few years, the price of construction materials has surged, with some costs rising by as much as 30%. Add to that a shortage of skilled workers, and you've got a perfect storm that's making new builds slower and more expensive than ever. Then there's red tape. Building approvals can take months, sometimes years, to get through Australia's labyrinth of regulations. Even when projects are greenlit, Delays in infrastructure development, like roads, schools, and utilities, can stall progress further. This is especially true in suburban and regional areas, where urban sprawl is outpacing the services people need to live comfortably. The result? Urban centers like Sydney and Melbourne are bursting at the seams, while outer suburbs and regional areas remain underdeveloped and less desirable due to their lack of infrastructure. People don't just need houses, they need communities with access to schools, transport, and jobs. Without these, even new developments fail to address the root of the problem. But there's another piece of the puzzle that's fueling this crisis: Australia's housing policies. Tax incentives like negative gearing and capital gains discounts are tilting the playing field toward investors, not everyday Australians. What does that mean for first-time buyers and renters? Let's unpack how these policies are impacting the market and why they're at the center of the housing debate. Let's get into one of the most contentious aspects of Australia's housing crisis: tax incentives like negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts. These policies, while great for investors, have been quietly tilting the housing market in their favor, leaving everyday Australians scrambling for affordable homes. First, what's negative gearing? It's a system where property investors can claim a tax deduction on the losses they incur from owning a rental property. For example, if the rent they collect doesn't cover the mortgage or maintenance costs, they can write off the difference on their taxes. Sounds harmless, right? But here's the catch: it encourages wealthy investors to scoop up multiple properties, driving up demand and prices in an already overheated market. Now add capital gains tax discounts into the mix. When investors sell a property, they pay less tax on the profit they make. Essentially, it rewards speculation and flipping properties rather than long-term ownership or building new homes. These policies were designed to stimulate the housing market, but over the years, they've done the opposite for affordability. Let's talk numbers. As of 2023, 30% of all Australian homes are owned by investors. In some suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne, that number jumps to almost 50%. This investor dominance means fewer homes are left for first-time buyers, or those just trying to find a stable rental. Imagine being a young couple, ready to settle down, but every auction you attend is dominated by seasoned investors with far deeper pockets. Frustrating, isn't it? And renters? They're paying the price too. When housing is treated primarily as an investment vehicle, rental prices surge because landlords know they have the upper hand. It's no wonder so many Australians are spending over 30% of their income on rent, well above what's considered sustainable. So, here's the big question: should housing be treated as a basic human right or as a commodity for wealth generation? This debate is at the heart of the crisis and will shape the future of Australia's housing landscape. But housing isn't just a social issue, it's an economic one too. When so much capital is funneled into real estate, other critical sectors of the economy suffer. What happens when housing speculation slows productivity growth and stifles innovation? Let's explore how the housing crisis is impacting Australia's economic future. Australia's housing crisis isn't just squeezing families and renters. It's taking a toll on the broader economy. When so much of the nation's wealth is tied up in property, it leaves less room for growth in other areas that are vital for long-term prosperity. Think about it. Australians have poured billions into real estate, chasing the promise of high returns. But here's the problem: this speculative frenzy diverts money away from more productive investments. Instead of fueling innovation in technology, manufacturing, or renewable energy, much of our capital is locked in housing assets that don't contribute to broader economic growth. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket and then wondering why the other baskets are empty. Here's where the numbers get alarming. In recent years, productivity growth in Australia has slowed to its lowest rate in decades. While property prices soar, industries like tech and infrastructure development lag behind global competitors. A stagnant productivity rate means fewer new jobs, lower wage growth, and ultimately, a less dynamic economy. And it doesn't stop there. Housing speculation has also created vulnerabilities in government revenue. Taxes like stamp duties and property rates provide a significant chunk of public funding, but they're highly volatile. When the housing market dips, so does the money available for critical services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. It's a precarious cycle that leaves Australians more exposed during economic downturns. Now, imagine this ripple effect. With stagnant productivity and declining innovation, Australia's ability to compete on the global stage diminishes. That's not just bad for the economy, it's bad for everyone living here. So how do we break free from this cycle? Should the government push for policies that incentivize innovation and investment in industries beyond real estate? Or are we too entrenched in the housing obsession to change course? These questions lie at the heart of Australia's economic future, but housing is just one piece of the puzzle. Even if you manage to secure a roof over your head, there's still the matter of everything else: food, utilities, transportation, and more. The rising cost of living in Australia has turned everyday expenses into another uphill battle. How did we get here, and what does it mean for the average Australian just trying to get by? Let's unpack the financial strain beyond housing. Living in Australia, for all its beauty and opportunity, has become an increasingly expensive affair. Over the last decade, the cost of everything, food, fuel, healthcare, and education, has been climbing, leaving Australians feeling the pinch more than ever. Imagine going to the grocery store and finding that your weekly bill has doubled in the past few years. Essential items like bread, milk, and fresh produce now cost significantly more, stretching already tight household budgets. According to recent studies, food prices have risen by over 25% since 2020 alone. For families, this often means sacrificing variety or nutritional quality just to make ends meet. Utilities are no better. Electricity prices in Australia rank among the highest globally, with many households seeing annual power bills soar past $2,000. And then there's fuel, an absolute necessity for commuting in sprawling cities or remote towns. Rising global oil prices have driven Australian petrol costs to some of their highest levels in years, impacting everything from individual commutes to the cost of goods transported by road. Here's where it gets even more difficult. While costs are going up, wages aren't keeping pace. Average wage growth has hovered around 2 to 3% per year, far below the rate of inflation. This means the purchasing power of Australians has diminished, leaving many struggling to afford not just luxuries but basic necessities. How do you save for your future when today's costs leave little to set aside? This is a question many Australians are grappling with. The rising cost of living has ripple effects far beyond the wallet. More Australians are relying on credit to get through the month, leading to increased debt. Mental health issues tied to financial stress are on the rise, with people worrying about whether they can afford to stay in their homes, pay for their children's education, or even put food on the table. And let's talk about what this means for young Australians. Saving for a home deposit? For many, it feels like a pipe dream. The struggle to cover daily costs means there's often nothing left for long-term goals, perpetuating a cycle of renting and financial insecurity. What's driving these costs up so rapidly? Is it just global trends, or are there deeper systemic issues at play within Australia's economy? And more importantly, how are Australians supposed to manage when the cost of simply living keeps climbing, leaving less room for dreams and ambitions? Smooth transition to solutions. It's clear that Australians are facing a financial squeeze from all sides. Housing, everyday expenses, and stagnant wages. But is there hope for change? Let's dive into potential solutions and explore what can be done to alleviate the pressures weighing down on Australians. Is there a way forward that balances opportunity with affordability? Let's find out. Fixing Australia's housing and cost of living crisis won't happen overnight, but there are clear steps we can take to make life more affordable and sustainable for everyone. First, tackling the cost of living is critical. By investing in renewable energy, we could lower power bills, while expanding subsidies for public transport would ease the strain on commuting costs. Pair that with wage growth, especially for low and middle-income earners, and Australians might finally see some relief in their daily expenses. When it comes to housing, the focus must shift from treating it as a commodity to viewing it as a basic necessity. Reforms to tax policies like negative gearing and capital gains discounts could level the playing field, giving first-time buyers a fair chance. At the same time, investing in public and affordable housing projects would help families struggling the most. But there's more to Australia than its cities. Encouraging regional growth with incentives for people to move to smaller towns could reduce pressure on urban centers and spread opportunity across the country. Finally, we need to break free from the housing obsession and look toward economic innovation. By investing in industries like technology, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing, we could create new jobs and reduce reliance on the volatile property market. It will take bold action from policymakers, collaboration across sectors, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. What do you think? Can these solutions turn Australia's challenges into opportunities? And which policies do you believe should be prioritized to create real change? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. If you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that dives into the issues shaping our world. Together, let's spark conversations that matter and advocate for a better tomorrow.